Thank you very much. So, dear colleagues, dear friends, dear Henrik, it was a true honor that when I was asked by CEBI President Kleven to make this laudation of Henrik on behalf of CEBI and the IIPF. Normally it's actually the vice president of IIPF who is doing the laudation, but they said, well, it's better you're doing it because you know Henrik much better. We have actually done a lot of work together. And Henrik, he's a world leader if you are in doubt in the area of public economics. He has been chief editor of the Journal of Public Economics, co-editor, as I already said, of the American Economic Review, ESG grant holder, responsible for the public economics in the CEPR network, although of course that's only the second best network in Europe, as we know, right? Since 2014, as says IFO Research Fellow, and we could continue on with Henrik's CV, that would take the full lecture, but maybe we should go back and think about where did it all start. So Henrik got his PhD back in 2003 from University of Copenhagen, and I have actually been asked a few times whether I was Henrik's supervisor. And unfortunately not. I wish I were, then that would be a great placement I could have on my CV, right? But I'm actually only 2 years older than Henrik. So Henrik's supervisor was one of my predecessors as area director of public economics in the CEBI network, namely Peter Birk Sørensen, who could not be here today for family reasons, but he sends his greetings to Henrik, and he's proud on behalf of you. The title of Henrik's dissertation was Taxation, Time Allocation, and Economic Efficiency. Now, that thesis had, I can't remember how many chapters, and I couldn't find it on the internet, but I knew that it has one paper, which is a single author paper entitled Optimal Taxation and the Allocation of Time, which was published in the Journal of Public Economics the year after. Now, in this paper, Henrik combines two strands of literature: optimal commodity taxation, that we all know, and then Baker's pioneering work on the allocation of time. So Henrik combined these two, and the idea of Baker was to say, well, if you think about what gives you utility, you don't get utility just for consumption. It's a combination of consumption goods and time. You need time for consumption. And what Henrik showed was then very elegantly, really standard Henrik way of doing it. It's super elegant model, coming up with a very simple formula, showing against what we normally say, well, we should have homogeneous commodity taxation. Now you should actually differentiate commodity taxation according to how much time you combine with all these goods. So this was a brilliant piece of work. Now at this time, it was not obvious at all that Henrik would later make major contributions to empirical methods and results in public economics. We did theory in Copenhagen, right? There was no teaching in econometrics or microeconometrics and all data and that kind of thing. We did theory. However, maybe a signal for the future at this point was Henrik's visit at Princeton, actually. Now he's a professor at Princeton, but doing his PhD, he was at Princeton. And I recall when he came back home, he told me that he had talked with another great public finance scholar, Harvey Rosen, who they talked about Emmanuel's work, for example, and told Henrik, this field, it's going to be empirical in the future, and if you really want to be there in the future, that's where the field is going. And Henrik comes back to, and I think we sort of agreed that was nonsense, right? Because, we were theorists, and we did not know about data. So from 2003 to 10 then, Henrik was assistant and then associate professor at University of Copenhagen. But in reality, he was not there a lot of time. In 2003, he visited Berkeley. We actually did that together. We started doing projects with Neda Issa and Emmanuel Saris. And then you came back, but then you continued in 2005. You went to Columbia, and you started collaborating with Wojciech Kopczuk. And then again in 2007, again, Columbia. And then you sort of think, hey, now Henrik is finally going to get back and maybe teach a little also, right? But at that time, he was sort of grown out of Copenhagen, so he went directly on the job market and went to London School of Economics as an assistant professor. Only 6 years after, He was full professor, and then he became headhunted to Princeton in 2017. So a very, very fast career here. Now, I cannot think of anyone who is more deserving to receive the honor after Richard Musgrave. Richard Musgrave conceptualized in a paper in 1939 the three functions or branches of government activity: redistribution, resource allocation, and macroeconomic stabilization. That was also the focus in his textbook together with his wife, Peggy, called Public Finance in Theory and Practice. Now, Henrik is really the right lecturer in that sense that he has made contributions to all three of these areas, and all he has done actually belong within these areas. Now, macroeconomic stabilization is maybe not really sort of today the key area of public economics, but Henrik has actually two papers on New Keynesian economics. One of them is published together with me in Journal of Public Economics. It is the least cited papers of Henrik. Now, these were still the young days, and at that time I tried to get Henrik into doing macro because I was actually doing macro. That was my area, and Henrik did public, and we started collaborating. And what happened, I was the senior person, but at the end, it turned me into public economics, right? So I have never had a course in public economics my whole life, but I ended up doing public economics because of Henrik. And, thank you so much for that. Thank God. Now, linking back to Musgrave, a lot of the other research by Henrik analyzes in different ways the trade-off between the redistributive function of tax and welfare policy on the one hand, and resource allocation, which we today call economic efficiency, on the other hand. On this, behavioral responses to taxation is key for assessing the equality efficiency trade-off and for optimal redistribution policy. On this, Henrik has done a lot of work which we could group into sort of different headings. A set of papers, the early work, is theoretically and it's theory and includes contributions showing how should you measure this trade-off, and also includes in optimal income tax papers, for example, extending the seminal work of James Mirrlees on optimal taxation of individuals to optimal taxation of couples. Another group of papers make key contribution quantifying labor supply responses to taxation and the elasticity of taxable income. A group of papers studied taxation, international labor mobility, in particular the challenge of taxing high-income superstars. Then you have a group of papers looking at tax evasion behavior and doing field experiments in different countries, including Germany and Denmark. And one of them is lucky for me, together with me actually, where we did some what we think ourselves as important work on third-party reporting as being a key thing on to fight tax evasion. Now, then you started developing the toolbox by making a methodological contribution to the bunching literature. Here you have a key paper showing how to use notches instead of kings. And a key thing actually is more powerful to use notches because you can identify one more moment. You can, for example, identify both the behavioral responses to taxation and at the same time the degree of optimization frictions. While if you only have kings, you can only identify one of these moments. So that method you have used yourself within on taxation, but the method has also been applied in many other areas now of economics by other researchers because it is a very powerful method to use in many contexts. Finally, Henrik is also renowned for his important work on gender inequality, starting with a key paper providing clean causal identification on the impact of children on the gender gap on income in the long run, in the very long run. And Henrik is going to talk about that in a moment, so I'm not going to dive into that. But bottom line, Henrik has contributed tremendously to this development towards a modern applied public economics compared to 25 years ago, when this network started, where everybody did theory and where we started also doing theoretical work and doing very theoretical elegant models, but maybe a little long way from practical policy at the end of the day. So Henrik has been sort of in this generation that has pushed the frontier in that way. Now, Henrik has inspired many young scholars, and I think they often ask, how did Henrik make it? You know, coming from Copenhagen, and at that time, University of Copenhagen was actually not very good, and ending up at a world-renowned scholar here at Princeton. This is difficult to answer, you know, how to become Henrik, right? There are many key personal characteristics to become a great researcher that Henrik had. But when thinking about why Henrik is a brilliant researcher, I want you to think about what would Henrik have been if not an economist? What would be his alternative profession? That's a question. Does anybody know what would Henrik have been? Now, if you don't know, you probably cannot guess it. While Henrik studied economics, he also considered another career. He actually did at the same time take lessons to become a filmmaker. So being a successful filmmaker requires making the movie we all want to see, which has not been done before. Pretty difficult, but the best are the best here, and they're very creative, right? And similarly, you can see Henrik is very gifted with the creativeness to identify big research questions before others, before us, and finding creative ways to provide the answers to these questions. And I think, you know, this creativity is probably the most important skill you can have in our profession. And Henrik, he's just best in class on that. I think Henrik would have been a great filmmaker, but I'm pretty happy actually that he decided just to go with economics, and in particular public economics. With these words, I think we should give Henrik a big hand, and then it's time for him to teach us about the Child Penalty Atlas.
Musgrave Visiting Professorship 2024 is awarded jointly by CEBI and IIPF to Professor Henrik Kleven, who will deliver the Richard Musgrave lecture on the Child Penalty Atlas. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Very much looking forward.